300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on JJ Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah, with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a Wednesday morning. A lot of NBA news to talk about. The playoffs are rolling on. Series are tied 1-1. Certain teams are up 2-0, down 2-0. It's really exciting. It's been a fascinating weekend, and even beginning of this week of the NBA playoffs. You can see it in the NBA ratings. They're up at least like 10% over the last several years. So there's a lot of intrigue and buildup and buzz surrounding this postseason. So I have to start with a really fascinating series that just took a drastic turn as of last night. The Phoenix Suns and the New Orleans Pelicans. That series is officially tied 1-1 after the Pelicans ended up going to Phoenix last night and claiming a 125-114 victory, primarily sparked by a second half run led by Brandon Ingram. But the big story of game number 2 was Devin Booker's injury. Ended up dropping, was cooking the Pelicans in the first half with 31 points. It was reported he felt a little tightness in his right hamstring that sidelined him the entirety of the second half. And obviously we've seen Devin Booker deal with hamstring injuries before. He missed some time this very season due to a hamstring injury. He actually missed time in last year's NBA Finals with a hamstring injury. This was after he dropped 27 in game 1 and 31 points in game 2. In that third game, he only scored 10 points, played under 30 minutes, missed the entire fourth quarter. It was later reported again that he was dealing with a minor hamstring injury. So this is major news for the Phoenix Suns as it relates to their overall goals and aspirations of winning a championship this postseason. But as it relates to last night in particular, I truthfully don't think that it necessarily determine the outcome of game 2, because Brandon Ingram played the best game of his career, 37 points, 11 rebounds, 9 assists, and really the Pelicans were outrightly outplaying the Phoenix Suns on the road, or from Phoenix's case, at home. And it was Devin Booker's heroics and incredible shot-making ability that kept him in it and actually gave them a little bit of a lead going into halftime. So I think as it relates to game 2, his injury didn't necessarily result in the outcome. However, I think that as it relates to their longer-term aspirations and goals this season, well, this is a major blow. And I actually think that this is a New Orleans Pelicans team that now has to be feeling pretty good about their situation, tied 1-1. Devin Booker's health is questionable. There's uncertainty surrounding it. You're returning home to New Orleans, where you do have a rabid fan base that will be excited to cheer them on. Now, all I can think about is how much I would love to see Zion Williamson in this postseason. The fact that we've been deprived of him this entire year is a shame to NBA fans all over the world. but that's a discussion for another day. So there's no guarantee, again, that Booker's presence would necessarily have won game two. However, I'll say for this particular series, do I think they still have enough with Chris Paul and with the players that they have to pull out this first round series victory? Yeah, I do. I think that Chris Paul at the helm can lead them through this first round. It's not going to be a cakewalk. Certainly won't be a cakewalk anymore. But I think they can probably pull it out in 6 games. I would imagine that, again, if Devin Booker has to miss time, that the Pelicans could probably take 1 game at home. I'd probably give them 1 game at home. But again, as much as we've praised Phoenix all season, and deservedly so for how complete of a team they are and have been, the reality is, with the exception of Devin Booker and Chris Paul, those are really the only 2 legitimate creators on the offensive side for the Phoenix Suns. They've got scores. They've got guys who can shoot it. Jay Crowder, Cameron Payne, Cameron Johnson, obviously DeAndre Ayton, Torrey Craig. These guys can all score the basketball. But most of their scoring comes from the flow of the offense, comes from incredible ball movement, screens. They're not as much going isolation and you just say, okay, give me the basketball and clear out of the way, and they're going to get you a bucket. They almost play a little bit kind of like how the Memphis Grizzlies play when they're playing without Ja Morant. There's a lot more ball movement. There are a lot more back picks. The fewer guys are holding on to the ball for as long. Everyone's getting touches. That's kind of how they like to play. And Phoenix can go very far in that manner. But when you remove a guy like Devin Booker, now all that onus falls on Chris Paul. And so, again, as much as we've all often argued that Chris Paul is their most valuable player for the Phoenix Suns, and I still think that there is a valid argument for that, there's no question that Devin Booker is their best player. And any aspirations of winning a championship, they're going to hinge on his availability. Quite frankly, on both of those guys' availabilities. I don't know if they can win an NBA championship without either one of those 2 guys, but perhaps even more so if they don't have at least Devin Booker. So this is a major blow for the Phoenix Suns. And all I could think about, the thoughts that kept rushing to the forefront of my mind, that were flooding to the surface of my brain, was just how unfortunate Chris Paul is. How all the time, every time he's been primed or in position to win or compete for a championship, he's had great rosters. He's been derailed by ill-timed injuries and just misfortune and bad luck. We saw that every destination he's been with the Clippers, Game 6, second half against the Houston Rockets. That was the Corey Brewer, Josh Smith game with James Harden and Dwight Howard on the bench. And they mounted a huge 20-plus second-half comeback to force the game into Game 7. Then, obviously, when Chris Paul was a member of the Houston Rockets, we saw the litany of injuries, hamstring, and others that he had to deal with throughout his time in Houston that derailed the Rockets against the Warriors. And even last season, in the postseason, he hurt his hand against the Lakers. And now this year with Devin Booker's health being questionable, it's just unfortunate for Chris Paul that he really can't catch a break every year that he's been in the league since he's been drafted in 2005. He just hasn't been able to have a break. Now, we don't know, again, the severity of Devin Booker's injury, but this is a major, major blow to the Phoenix Suns, and we'll have to wait and see what they report back. But again, it seemed like he was playing phenomenally in the first half. He didn't have any limp to him. So this is a little bit surprising. Perhaps it's just a cautious thing on the part of the Phoenix Suns. Hopefully it is, because they were primed and positioned to make a special run this year. And all of that will be stunted if Devin Booker is gone for a significant amount of time. So I want to transition to another kind of interesting topic there are a lot of higher seeded teams, two in particular that I want to touch on, the Memphis Grizzlies and the Dallas Mavericks, that are currently tied in their first round series 1-1. However, I think that for both of those teams, the ways in which they've gotten to this point being tied 1-1 are drastically different. And that's why it made me think about which team I'd rather be in their position. Whose position I'd rather be in, the Mavericks or the Memphis Grizzlies, who are both tied at 1-1. Now, I think that what makes these situations in particular so much more complex is the fashions in which these teams have won and lost games, because they haven't been consistent. They have not been consistent. So on the part of the Dallas Mavericks, for me, what's interesting about the Dallas Mavericks is they had to initially and immediately come to grips with the reality that, hey, we're not going to be playing with Luka Doncic. We don't know when he's coming back, but he's definitely missing games 1 and 2. They obviously split those first 2 games. They had to quickly galvanize and rally around one another immediately. So I think that once Luka Doncic went down, whatever expectations that they had set for themselves, that the organization had set for them, that the media had set for the Dallas Mavericks, all of those took a precipitous dive the second Luka Doncic was ruled out for game 1 and missed game 2. And so because of that, as disappointed perhaps as the Dallas Mavericks were, and as worried as we should be about the situation that they're in, the fact that they're having to play this series without Luka Doncic, I think that a similar argument can be framed that, hey, you know what? We're playing without Luka Doncic. The expectations have been sapped. Now we're kind of playing with house money. And we can go to Utah, and perhaps there's a little bit of optimism now that Luka Doncic may return. But those initial fears of humiliation and of uncertainty after dropping the first game, the fact that they weren't whole, the fact that they haven't been healthy throughout this postseason, missing their elite A-list guard / forward, whatever position you want to call Luka Doncic, he's so versatile. I think that in a lot of ways, it actually gave Dallas a pass this postseason. Now, again, it doesn't diminish the perhaps internal triage that they are kind of having to deal with as far as, you know, their own mental state and perhaps their own expectations for their organization, for the team as a collective group. I think that fan base and the media can understand if they lose to the Utah Jazz without Luka Doncic playing in half the games. So it's a disappointing, perhaps, end to a season if they had to lose. But again, I think they're given a little bit of a pass. So that situation to me is a little bit more favorable than the situation for Memphis. I'm actually a little bit more concerned if I'd be the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, obviously, they quashed any concerns about game 2 and their ability to rebound after getting beaten down in game 1, 130 to 117. They demolished the Timberwolves last night by 28 points, 124 to 96. So, yes, they feel a little bit more confident going into Minnesota. But I think that Memphis is the team that needs to be worried, because if you looked at how Minnesota beat Memphis in game 1, it wasn't because Memphis's strengths didn't shine through, meaning it's not like we didn't see the depth of Memphis in game 1. You had multiple guys scoring in double digits, which is Memphis's go-to kind of move. That's the book on Memphis, is their depth. They had 11 guys score yesterday and 10 of them played legitimate minutes. That shined through in both games 1 and game 2. The difference is in game 1, Karl Anthony Towns was a monster. Defensively, Memphis doesn't really have much of an answer for him as long as Karl Anthony Towns can keep his emotions in check. Game 1, he was fantastic, 29 and 13. Game 2, he was dealing with foul trouble that kind of neutralized him. But Steven Adams and Xavier Tillman, and even Brandon Clark and Kyle Anderson to a lesser degree, when Karl Anthony Towns is engaged, they don't really have an answer for him. Steven Adams is a decent defender. Those guys collectively are solid, but they don't really have an answer for him. And Anthony Edwards, who's a burgeoning star, had 36 points on the road, fourth most playoff points in a playoff game debut in NBA history. So he's got star potential, and he's already proving he's a star. And even in game one, when you can say he had a quote-unquote bad game, he still dropped 20 points on 40% shooting, which isn't absolutely atrocious. So the reason why I'm concerned about Memphis is because here you have a team who was completely healthy, completely loaded. They played the first two games of the postseason at home with their complete roster, and they split against a young, up-and-coming, hungry Minnesota Timberwolves team who, yes, they probably had a bit of their behind taking a chunk out of last night, but they're returning back home to Minnesota where they're going to still play a lot more confidently. Coach Finch can still tell this team, hey, listen, we're tied 1-1 going back home. And if you listen to any of the pressers, Anthony Edwards doesn't look like a guy who's going to be fazed being tied 1-1. Patrick Beverley isn't a guy who's going to be going anywhere. He's going to continue to be the worst knot in your back, a pesky defender, just a pest all around. John Morant, who's been excellent this postseason. John Morant's been excellent, but he still has to contend with Patrick Beverley throughout this entire postseason, at least the first round. And again, as excellent as John Morant has been, 32-8 in game one, near 23-point triple-double last night. His facilitating has been spectacular. He's been doing that all season. But I think that as great as Memphis still is as a team, the truth of the matter is John Morant, while he may be the best individual player in this series, the next two or three best players in the series belong to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, whatever order you decide between those two guys. And you can argue D'Angelo Russell are the next three best players in the series. So from a talent perspective, talent-wise, the Minnesota Timberwolves have more talent than the Memphis Grizzlies. And what we've seen throughout history in the NBA playoffs is the regular season highlights the depth of teams. The postseason highlights the star power of teams. And I know all the stats and the record about Memphis being 20-5 without John Morant. And truthfully, in game two last night, it was the bench and the depth in that second quarter allowing the Grizzlies to kind of stretch the lead. And then the beginning of the third quarter, they obviously blew them out. And that was all she wrote. But imagine what we'd be saying about this series if John Morant wasn't available. And this is why I've always had a problem with all these media experts and analysts and guys who try to kind of dock John Morant points in the MVP conversation outside of the fact that he missed games simply on the basis that, his team has a 20-5 record without him. The reality, the question you need to ask yourself is, how would we be viewing the Memphis Grizzlies in this series against the Timberwolves if they did not have John Morant? And we both know the answer to that question. The answer is 0% chance of winning this postseason first-round series if they don't have John Morant. And that's the point, is in the postseason, it comes down to the stars you have. Now, you can win individual games with that bench, and that's certainly – that's what Memphis has been able to do all season successfully. And again, I'm not saying they're going to lose this first-round series to the Timberwolves, but if you're asking me between these two situations, which one I'd rather be in, truthfully, I think that everything, the narrative, the availability of guys, the matchup, I'd rather be the Dallas Mavericks. I truly would. I think that Memphis is in for a long series, even if they are able to pull it out. Dallas may also be, but again, they're playing without Luka Doncic, so I think they naturally have a built-in pass because the Timberwolves are coming. They're feeling good, and when they return to the Target Center, it's going to be a raucous crowd. It's going to be a raucous crowd. They haven't advanced past the first round since 2004 with KG, so they're going to be excited. We saw the atmosphere against the Clippers in the play-in game, and that was a play-in game. This is for the playoffs. So, again, I'm not saying Memphis isn't going to win, but I'm still a little bit worried. I still have a little bit of trepidation from that Memphis side going into the rest of the first round. Okay, final topic before I shift to my Malkin's moments. Now that we've kind of had a full weekend to process some of the first couple games of the NBA playoffs, teams have gone up 2-0. Some teams have only played one game. Obviously, we're seeing game 2 tonight between the Nets and the Celtics, and you've got the Milwaukee Bucks and the Bulls. Game 3 between the Sixers and the Toronto Raptors. There are a lot of great series that are still going on and more opportunities for guys to shine. But I wanted to highlight through the first 5 days of the NBA playoffs, who have been, or which player in particular has been the most impressive so far. There are a lot of candidates. You can look at who I've mentioned, the aforementioned Anthony Edwards, who's been fantastic, 36 points in his playoff debut in game 1. You can look at Tyrese Maxey, who's got an incredibly strong case, 38 points in game 1, near triple-double a couple days ago in game 2 against the Raptors. They're up 2-0. The Philadelphia 76ers are in that series. Chris Paul had a monster game 1. Kyrie was magnificent against the Brooklyn Nets in game 1. There are a lot of guys you can highlight, but for me, the guy who has stood out the most in the first couple of days of the postseason is the Golden State Warriors' Jordan Poole. And I think that he has to be the unanimous pick for several reasons. Let me first start with knocking off some of the other guys. This isn't to put down anyone, but it's to put into perspective what Jordan Poole's been doing. Obviously, Anthony Edwards was tremendous in game 1, dissipated a little bit in game 2. They're tied 1-1. Tyrese Maxey is still playing with Joel Embiid and James Harden. So as great as he's been, he's got a lot of help. Chris Paul and the Suns lost game 2. Kyrie, we don't know what's going to happen. They still lost game 1. Jordan Poole, this is a guy who dropped 30 points in his playoff debut. That is going to be mentioned in my Malkin's moments, by the way. It was tied for second most points in franchise record for a playoff debut with 30 points. Did Jordan Poole, shooting 69% from the floor in that game, 71% from the three-point line. He was fantastic. And what did he do in game 2? He followed it up with another 29-point performance to go along with like 5 rebounds, 8 assists, still 50% shooting from 3, not just from the floor, from 3. He's been absolutely sensational. 59 combined points in the first 2 games of the postseason. This is a guy who averaged 18.5 in the regular season, and now he's the team's leading scorer in the postseason. And what's impressive to me about Jordan Poole, we always talk about expectations for guys going in to various situations. And I do think that it's important when you're asking yourself this type of question of evaluating individual guys' performances. Well, what did we expect to see from these individuals going in to this circumstance? Jordan Poole, this was a guy who was drafted 2019, 28th overall pick. A lot of scouts didn't even have him as a first-round draft pick. They envisioned him as a second-round draft pick. And when you compare his performances to some of the other guys that I've mentioned, Anthony Edwards, number 1 overall pick. Kyrie Irving, number 1 overall pick. Chris Paul, number 4 overall pick. Jason Tatum, number 2 overall pick. Now, that's why I give Tyrese Maxey a lot of credit. He was the 21st overall pick. But again, he's playing with Embiid and Harden. So to me, the impressive scale slides down just a touch. Again, he's been fantastic, though. But Jordan Poole, this is a guy who had to work his way up in this league. Started out in the G League with the Santa Cruz Warriors, was unstoppable there, was given an opportunity to make the rotation with the Warriors. He's blossomed in that role. Obviously, last season we saw him really flourish and come into his own in the second half of the season. He's been fantastic ever since. And he's been so good that even with Klay Thompson's return, who in a lot of ways you can argue, as much as I love Klay Thompson, he's kind of stunted the growth of Jordan Poole. As great as Klay Thompson is, Jordan Poole, he's been proving to the coaching staff, hey, you cannot take me out of a ball game. You can't bring me off the bench. I need to be in the starting lineup. That's how fantastic he's been. He's been so fantastic that he's forced Steve Kerr's hand of bringing Steph Curry off the bench as he's kind of recovering from his own injury. So to me, Jordan Poole, he's a flashy kind of player. He's got eye candy with his style of play. He's got a nasty handle, yet he fits in harmoniously with Steph, with Klay, with Draymond in that Golden State Warriors system because he's actually a really unselfish player. As flashy as his style can come across at times, he's really an unselfish player. He moves without the ball. He doesn't hold on to it for too long. He's got unlimited range. I mean, that's the impressive thing. He's really the third Splash brother now with Steph and with Klay. But he's a marksman from anywhere. He's got a nasty handle, one dribble, pull up, crossover, dribbling into a jump shot, catch and shoot, doesn't matter. The guy can finish around the rim. He's a little bit more stocky and strong than you might think based on his appearance. Nice body control. This is an elite player. And you combine the fact that he's been producing and his team has been winning. When you look at all the NBA playoff games that have taken place and you look at all the teams that have been playing this postseason, you can argue the Golden State Warriors have looked like the best team this postseason. And you can argue he's been the best player on the best team that's up 2-0 right now. Now, again, no one's claiming he's better than Steph. But in the first two games, he's been absolutely fantastic. And again, I'm not saying necessarily that the Warriors are going to win the championship. I'm not going to make a claim like that in this topic, but it's undeniable that he has been absolutely fantastic. And collectively as a team, the Warriors have looked the closest to being a flawless basketball team through the first two games of the postseason. And he's a big reason why. And I remember I talked about this on the show Morning Joe several months ago when there was a report that came out that the Warriors were thinking about offering Jordan Poole an $80 million extension. Now, at the time, I was a huge proponent and an advocate of that. I was all in. Now, that would be theft. I wouldn't be doing, and the Warriors wouldn't, as an organization, wouldn't be doing or wouldn't be exhibiting their fiduciary responsibility if they offered him that contract now, because now his value has skyrocketed from that point. Now, I was all in back then. Clearly, I'm still all in now. I'm not sure if he can command a super max kind of an extension or even that second contract past your rookie contract extension, because he's never officially made an all-star team. He's never made an all-NBA team. So I don't know if he's going to get one of those 5-year, $170 million contracts. Probably don't see that happening, but can I see him signing a contract or being offered a 4 or 5 year, $100 million, $125 million contract, 4 years, $100 million contract? Yeah. If not exceeding that. And truthfully, it'd be worth it because he is proving that it's almost like what the Oklahoma City Thunder had in James Harden. However, it'd be like them keeping him. It'd be like them retaining him for an additional season and letting him kind of blossom and flourish. That's what the Warriors are kind of doing. We'll see what they do in the offseason. But again, he's been the guy who through the first couple games of the postseason has been stellar. I've been absolutely most impressed by him, and I cannot wait to watch them play again. I think they're playing on Thursday, game 3 at the Denver Nuggets. Cannot wait for that. Okay, final topic, my Malkins moments. I am ending a little bit earlier today. I have some great Malkins moments for you. So I have to start with Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler of the Miami Heat. He scored a playoff career high 45 points last night in the Miami Heat's 115-105 Game 2 victory over the Atlanta Hawks. They've now taken a 2-0 lead in that best-of-7 series. So here's the impressive thing. Jimmy Butler scores 45 points on 15 of 25 shooting. So extremely efficient. I think that's about, if I do my math correctly, like 60% from the floor, 4 for 7 from 3, 11 for 12 from the free throw line. But here's the impressive thing. So that 15 for 25 from the floor stat line, he now joins Dwayne Wade and LeBron James as the only Heat players with that many made shot attempts in a playoff game in a Miami Heat uniform. And they brought up a great stat for which Miami Heat players in the postseason have scored the most 40-plus point games. Dwayne Wade leads the team with 7. And now Jimmy Butler's tied LeBron James with 3 for the most 40-point playoff games in a Miami Heat uniform. He had 0 turnovers and 0 fouls. 0 turnovers and 0 fouls with his 45 points. He became the first player since the Atlanta Hawks, funny enough that it happened at the expense of the Atlanta Hawks, since the Atlanta Hawks' legend Dominique Wilkins did it in 1988, posted a postseason stat line like that. And again, Jimmy Butler's not typically known as an elite scorer, not because he can't score, it's because he doesn't serve that role every single night. Sometimes he's kind of a 20-point defensive stopper type of guy, but if you allow him to go one-on-one, he's more than capable of lighting your team up. He did that. Major kudos to him. Not to mention, he joined the team in 2019, and since then they've made the postseason all 3 years. They reached the NBA Finals in his first season, and now they're a 1 seed. So pretty good start for Jimmy Butler. Shout out to Anthony Edwards. Again, I know in Game 2 he struggled, just 20 points, but I want to highlight his Game 1 performance against the Memphis Grizzlies since I wasn't on air on Monday. In their 130-117 victory, Ant, as he is, that's his moniker, dropped 36 points, which was the 4th most points dropped in a playoff debut in NBA history. This guy's ceiling is clearly through the roof. He's playing at a supremely high level, and a major shout out to him and that performance. Absolutely spectacular. I mentioned Jordan Poole and his playoff debut, scoring 30 points, which is tied for second most in the Golden State Warriors franchise for the second most points scored in a playoff debut. Again, 30 he dropped in the 123-107 Game 1 victory over the Denver Nuggets. Now they're up 2-0. He continues to kind of light up everyone. It's fantastic to see. So major shout out to him. Major shout out to the Boston Celtics. A couple Boston Celtics guys. I'll start with Jason Tatum, who hit a pirouette layup buzzer beater to beat the Brooklyn Nets in Game 1, 115-114. He dropped 31 points in that performance. It was the first playoff buzzer beater by a Celtic since Paul Pierce in 2010. And it happened in 2010 against the Miami Heat, funny enough. In the first round of the 2010 playoffs, Paul Pierce hit a buzzer beater in Game 3 at Miami to give the Celtics a 3-0 lead. They won 198 that game. And ultimately, we saw what happened in 2010. The Boston Celtics reached the NBA Finals, and they lost to the Los Angeles Lakers. I was certainly happy about that. That's still one of my favorite. That might be my favorite basketball moment of all time, was Game 7 against the Celtics. Just to take a little dig at the Celtics. But shout out to Jason Tatum, and shout out to the Celtics' Marcus Smart for winning Defensive Player of the Year. He beat out the Utah Jazz's Rudy Gobert and the Phoenix Suns' Mikal Bridges and a host of others to win the award. He became the first guard to win it since Gary Payton won it in 1996, the glove. So major shout out to Marcus Smart. In fact, the way that they surprised him yesterday or 2 days ago at their practice facility, Gary Payton actually flew out to Boston to surprise him with the award. It was a really, really touching way to celebrate a guy in Marcus Smart, who's another bigger, kind of more physical pest than even a Patrick Beverley. He just has a great spirit about him, Marcus Smart. The way that he gets into you, the passion and the responsibility that he takes, he relishes that kind of pressure and that onus of trying to take on the opposing team's best player. And he does that at a supremely high level. So major shout out to him. And congratulations to Marcus Smart. That'll do it for us. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe with Jonah Malkin. That's Morning J-O with Jonah Malkin on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at morning_Joe, at Jonah_Malkin. Instagram, JMalk97, TikTok, Jonah Malkin. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.